Welcome to our last session of Plot Twists. In today's session, we're going to study the life of Naaman. Now, some of you maybe have never heard of Naaman. In fact, I had never heard of Naaman, and I'm a pastor's kid until I went to high school, because I went to a high school called Naaman Forest High School. I just thought it was some random dude named Naaman. And then my father, who is a pastor, told me that, no, Naaman's actually in the scriptures. And we find his story in 2 Kings. And in 2 Kings chapter 5, starting in verse 1, it says this. It says, Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Syria, was a great man with his master and in high favor, because by him the Lord had given victory to Syria. He was a mighty man of valor, but he was a leper. And today, a question I think we can ask ourselves is, what do we do when the thing we need the most can't be bought, and it can't be earned, and it can't be controlled? Because as we just read, Naaman had it all. He had power, he had wealth, he had rank in the army, he was a general, he had prestige, but he couldn't fix what mattered most in his life. He had leprosy. It was out of his control. It wasn't something he desired. It wasn't something he wanted. And sometimes the biggest plot twist in our lives isn't what we necessarily lose or what we gain. It's what we cannot fix on our own. It's when we need that divine intervention in our lives. It's when we need someone else to intervene in a way, because we cannot fix or control what is happening to us. We cannot fix or control our circumstances. And in order to see and to receive the intervention that you may need, because you can't fix it on your own, it takes a huge dose of humility. Humility. A word we don't really like very much, a word that is kind of countercultural in our world today, one that we don't see modeled by a lot of leaders, one we don't see modeled by a lot of people who are quote unquote in charge or in control. And here was Naaman, who is a top leader, who is a general, who has a high rank, and he's going to model for us today humility in order to receive what God had for him, the plot twist in his life. So we go back to this scripture. We see a story really in verses 1 through 8. And to kind of give you some background, Naaman was the commander of the army of modern day Syria, biblically Aram, a powerful nation that was actually hostile to Israel. Leprosy in this time period wasn't just a physical disease in this culture, because it also brought a lot of isolation, shame. It really was a social death. It was a social death sentence to Naaman and to others who struggled or had this disease. But despite his power, Nathan's condition made him desperate. And it was a young, unnamed Israelite servant girl who intervenes in this story, who points him to Elisha. Now, Elisha, if you remember from scriptures, is really the protege of the prophet Elijah. And he follows in the footsteps of his mentor, and he is a prophet to the people of God. And this young Israelite servant girl points Naaman to Elisha. And it's, again, going back to where we started with Leah, it kind of highlights the fact that God often uses overlooked people, this young servant girl, as a plot twist in his story to show that he'll use anyone and everyone to accomplish his will and his purposes for people's lives. And so for Naaman, he shows us a couple of things that I think right away. Number one, you cannot rank your way into God's plan for your life. It doesn't matter your status. It doesn't matter what you've accomplished. You're not going to be able to network your way into his grace. It doesn't matter who you know. Naaman knew everybody. He had the power. He had the network. He had the connections. It wasn't going to get rid of his leprosy. And he had a lot of riches. And you cannot buy really what only humility can receive. And Naaman was stuck in this position, in this situation, unable to control or fix what mattered most in his life, which was his disease of leprosy. And so here is Naaman expecting this royal welcome, this dramatic healing, and something that would fit his status. And instead, he got instructions from Elisha to dip into a dirty river. to go into the waters, these muddy waters. And that's when his real test was going to begin. So we go back now to chapter 5, verse 9. We'll pick up the story there. So Naaman came with his horses and his chariots, showing you he still is trusting a lot of his power and his prestige. He's the general. He's the man in charge. Here's all my power, horses and chariots. And he goes there, and there's the prophet Elisha meets him there and torn his clothes and sent to the king saying, why have you torn your clothes? Let him come now to me, that he may know that there's a prophet in Israel. And Elisha sent a messenger to him now in verse 10 saying, go and wash in the Jordan 7 times. This is the Jordan River, the muddy waters of the Jordan, and your flesh will be restored, and you shall be clean. Verse 11, but Naaman was angry and went away, saying, behold, I thought that he would surely come out to me and stand and call upon the name of the Lord his God and wave his hand over the place and cure the leper. And so you see that Naaman's upset. His expectations was really this show that Elisha was going to wave his hand and heal him of his leprosy. But instead he got silence. Elisha was like, yeah, tear your clothes, get in the water, dip 7 times. He wanted this prestige. That was his expectations, but he got a prophet's servant instead. You don't send a servant to meet with a leader. You send a leader to meet with the leader. Servants meet with one another. But here he was in an unexpected way, feeling dishonored. He desired this honor, but then he got the humiliation. And he had to dip into this muddy Jordan River, which was beneath him. Well, until it wasn't. Because we see in verse 13 and 14, it says this, but his servants came near and said to him, my father, it is a great word the prophet has spoken to you. Will you not do it? He has actually said to you, wash and be clean. And so he went, Naaman did, and dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the word of the man of God, Elisha, and his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. Sometimes simple obedience is simply the hardest thing to do. And God is asking us to do things his ways and to follow him. And that takes a lot of humility to acknowledge that you're not in charge, that you cannot fix it, that you need help, and to humble yourself before a mighty God who has restoration for you, who has healing for you, who has miracles for your life. And it's the hardest thing to do, to simply bow down and to trust him. In Luke 4:27, the New Testament, Naaman appears because Jesus reminds the crowd in Nazareth there were many lepers in Israel in the time of Elisha, yet only Naaman the Syrian was cleansed. And Jesus uses Naaman's humility. He uses Naaman's story to actually confront the pride of the Jewish people, because Naaman was not a Jew. Naaman was a Gentile. He was outside of the people of God. And these outsiders sometimes had more faith than the insiders. And that plot twist right there enraged the crowd like Jesus could only do, because he was challenging their hearts. He was challenging their religious systems. He was pointing to the fact that Jesus came not just to heal the lepers, but to heal all people and to call all people, Jews, Gentiles, slave, free, male and female, into his name. But it takes humility to recognize who Jesus really is and what he really wants to do in our lives. The story is so full of plot twists. You have the servant girl. You have Elisha telling him to get into the Jordan River or the muddy waters. And you have Jesus using a non-Jewish person to challenge the Jewish people that he actually was the Messiah. And the plot twist even comes for all of us, because we need to dip in the water as well, in the baptism waters of Jesus, to go into the grave with Christ and to come out of the grave in his resurrection glory and power, because none of us can receive what we truly need from Jesus until we approach him with humility and admit that we are not God. The plot twist of our story is acknowledging that Jesus is actually the author of our story and not us. And so as we bring this plot twist series to a conclusion, that's my challenge for all of us, is to walk this story of faith out, but to not walk it out in pride, to not walk it out in control, to not walk it out in defeat, to not walk it out based off your circumstances, but to walk it out knowing that at every twist and every turn and every corner, in every season, in every situation, there is a God who loves you so much that he has never given up on you, that he'll never leave you, he'll never forsake you, and your story isn't over. He's still writing.